In this video, we're going to look at why drinking alcohol is really a waste of time and it's a massive waste of money. You might not have realised how alcohol is negatively impacting your life, and my hope is that this video will open your eyes to some of the ways in which toxic negativity is seeping in and causing you problems when maybe you can't even see it at the moment. It took me a long time to realise that alcohol was having such a negative impact on my life, and realising that almost every time that I drank, I ended up worse off than before I started in one way or another. And eventually I got to that place where I realised that actually alcohol was a waste of time. It was a waste of my emotional energy, my mental bandwidth, and so much more. And as I mentioned in this video, I'm going to share a few of the ways in which I believe that drinking alcohol really is a massive waste of time. The first one is that every time I was drinking, it ended in disaster. And I think that's the same for most people. There's not really a maybe here. It almost always ended in some kind of disaster. I wasn't an angry drunk. I didn't go out and start fights with strangers, but for some people, that's absolutely a thing. I was more of an emotional drunk. My emotions would come to the surface and I might end up crying myself to sleep or having an argument with somebody who I actually wanted to feel love from. And I'd become frustrated that I wasn't getting that need met, even though it's not their need to necessarily meet. Always, one way or another, it would end in disaster when I drank. And when I reflected back on my drinking days, I could see that almost every occasion it was some kind of disaster, and always the more that I drank, the bigger the disaster tended to be. Now, I also used to believe that drinking alcohol kind of loosened me up before sex, and that sex was better when you were drinking. Now, don't get me wrong, it took some time after I quit to really get comfortable in my own skin and to explore the world of sex without booze involved. But it's so much better. Alcohol really does take away from your sex life. Many people don't realise it, but it impacts us not only physically as a man, it can cause erectile dysfunction, and for women it can cause all sorts of problems, including dryness and issues with libido. And put that all on top of us being emotionally unstable when we've been drinking, and it's a recipe for disaster. And equally, when we drink, we tend to become emotionally detached from the people that we loved. The best sex is when we're emotionally connected with people. When we don't drink, we rebuild those connections. We foster true authenticity in our lives, and we feel way more connected to the people that we love. That naturally means that sex is infinitely better. I drank almost every day for over 20 years and I'd never experienced it. It's taken me some time, as I say, to get really comfortable in that part of my life. But believe me, it is so much better, and I see it time and time again where alcohol is stealing from people and actually making their sex lives worse, and they don't even realise it. That is one massive reason why alcohol is a huge waste of time. Now, I mentioned the financial side. Alcohol costs a lot of money, and if you're drinking every day or you're binge drinking, you're probably already partly aware of the cost, the financial cost. I was spending anything from £20 to £30 every single day on alcohol. You add that up over the 20 years that I've been drinking, and it is a serious amount of money. It's actually scary. I could have probably bought myself another house with the amount that I poured down the toilet. It's frightening, and there's way better things that I could be spending that money on or saving that money in the bank. But notice the financial cost of alcohol. It really is a massive waste of money as well as a waste of our time. But I think you've got to understand how it's a waste of time before you can fully see that it's also a waste of money. But I wanted to throw that in. I want you to start paying attention to how much money financially this is really costing you. I also started to realise that the hangovers just weren't worth it. As a trade-off in return for a night of drinking, having a hangover for 2 days just wasn't worth it. I didn't want to give that up in return for a night of drinking. When I was younger, the hangover might have lasted for a couple of hours the morning after I'd been drinking, but the older I got, the longer they seemed to last. Equally, my tolerance to alcohol had built, so I was drinking that much more. The hangovers just came to to a place where I just didn't want them anymore. And if I had a heavy night of drinking, they would last a really long time. And that would massively affect so many different areas of my life. It's so good to know that I never need to have a hangover again, and that I haven't had a hangover for the best part of 4 years. It's a great feeling. And when I see people with a hangover now, I can't deny there's a little element of smugness around knowing that I never need to feel like that again. Alcohol's also not worth it because we tend to embarrass ourselves when we drink. I didn't keep a list of the number of times I embarrassed myself, but believe me, there's another book in there somewhere if I had that. I've seen it all. People confessing their love to their work colleagues, sending texts to their exes when they're drunk, you name it, sleeping with strangers that they wouldn't even give the time of day to if they didn't have alcohol in their system. These are all things that can cause us to feel significant amounts of shame. You heap that on top of a hangover, on top of feeling emotionally unstable, and it's a recipe for disaster. We end up feeling worse about ourselves, our self-esteem takes a knock, and our overall feeling of worthiness really does take a hit with those embarrassing behaviours that tend to come to the surface when we put alcohol into our bodies. Is that really worth it? Is drinking really worth it? The trade-off of an hour or so of a kind of euphoric feeling from drinking alcohol in return for all this stuff, to me it just became a deal that was no longer worth doing. And on top of all that, alcohol makes you look older. It puts darkness under your eyes, it dries out your skin, it can cause wrinkles to appear. It ages you. It makes you look much older than you really are. The number of people who've quit drinking who I work with who tell me that people have said to them they look younger after they've stopped is a huge number. And it's the same the other way round. Just think of those pictures you see of people who use meth. You see the before photo where they look normal, they look healthy. And then after they've taken the drug some years later, they look awful. They look really badly affected by it. Alcohol does exactly the same. It's more subtle and it happens from the inside out. So not only does it age our physical appearance, it ages us within. We lose that playful part of ourselves, that joyful part of ourselves, as alcohol sucks away that inner joy that once existed. It absolutely does this, and you need to know it. Alcohol absolutely takes that away from us and makes us older both physically and internally. And to be able to tap back in to that childlike, playful part that exists within us all is an absolute joy. And I want you to experience it. Know that alcohol will steal that from you, and you won't be able to tap into that part of you as readily as you can when you don't have alcohol in your life. That really is a gift. Now, I've only scratched the surface with these. Some of the things that make me believe that alcohol is just not worth it. And the reason I wanted to do this video was to help you draw attention to your own behaviours and the things that have come up that might make you question whether your relationship with alcohol is really worth it. And there are so many other ways it affects us. It affects our relationships, it affects our ability to parent, it affects our abilities at work, it affects our health, it affects our all-round motivation. And I've covered that on so many of my other videos. You're welcome to take a look through them. But my hope is that you'll start to really reflect on this and think about whether this deal is actually worth doing. One of the biggest worries for me when I was drinking was my health. I used to worry that I would develop some kind of irreversible health problem, something terminal from my drinking. Thankfully, that didn't happen while I was drinking, and I think there was always an element of it won't happen to me. But that's not the reality. That's a false belief, and it absolutely can happen to any of us. And there's a video next to me now which talks about the physical dangers of drinking alcohol. I'd like you to check that out next. Simply click on the video and you can watch it right away. And until next time, I'll see you very soon.